Добрий день всім. Ми дуже раді, що ви доєднались до нашого сьогоднішнього ефіру. Хочу перевірити, чи Кайлі чує мене наразі через перекладачів.
Yes, I can hear.
Добре. Тоді ми будемо починати нашу серію вебінарів. Це, так я би сказала, другий сезон наших вебінарів, які стосуються дітей, які народились з низькою вагою, і катамнестичного спостереження, і взагалі спостереження за цими дітьми в подальшому. Для всіх, хто хоче подивитись перший сезон, є така можливість, він весь викладений в мене на каналі доктор Булавінова. І це ми розпочинаємо такий собі другий сезон. І я рада вам представити нашу спікерку, яка є співзасновницею та CEO фундації Miracle Babies з Австралії. І це Kylie Pussell. Тому одразу переходимо до діла і переходимо до презентації Kylie, яку вона погодилась для нас сьогодні зробити. В нас дуже велика різниця в часі, тобто ми зовсім в інших куточках світу наразі знаходимося. Дуже цінуємо те, що Kylie виділила нам свій час і свою увагу для того, щоб поговорити з українськими спеціалістами на таку важливу тему. Прошу, Kylie.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity and invitation to share with you a little bit about Australia and families' care and support that we have here in our country. I'm, as mentioned, from Miracle Babies Foundation. We're Australia's leading organisation that supports premature and sick newborns, their families, and the hospitals that care for them. No, it's not working. Sorry, the share isn't working now.
Kylie, what is not working? Or it's okay?
Just come up, got stuck.
Okay, good. It's okay, it's fine. Please proceed.
Hopefully it works now. In Australia, there's 48,000 babies that are born that require specialised medical care. So either in a neonatal intensive care unit, and we also have a lot of special care nurseries which can care for these babies at lower levels that might not require intensive care but still require long-term hospitalisation. Out of that 48,000, 27,000 babies are born premature, and around 1,000 babies or just under will lose their fight for life in Australia each year. Our purpose at Miracle Babies Foundation is to improve, support and enhance all lives impacted by a premature or sick birth. Our vision, our long-term goal is that we can help be part of supporting and creating happy and healthy families reaching their potential. Our mission in our everyday work is to work in partnership with families and health professionals to provide a community of shared experiences, peer emotional support, and access to education and evidence-based information. We use our parent voice in research and advocacy to influence positive change. Our life-saving and life-changing work aims to enhance lives for all to reach their potential. So that's me. I am CEO and co-founder of Miracle Babies. We are celebrating our 20th year this year of being an organisation. So we've certainly learnt a lot along the way, and we've been able to expand and evolve as an organisation to meet the growing needs of families. So I've been asked today to talk a little bit about what happens in Australia with follow-on assessments once a baby is discharged from the NICU, and it can differ from hospital to hospital as to what is offered and what resources are available. But generally, most extremely preterm babies that fit the criteria will have an assessment after discharge at 4 months, 8 months, 12 months, and at 2 years. Some of those babies that are doing really well and meeting all their milestones will be discharged from the program at 2 years. Others that still need some support will have a further follow-on assessment at around 4 to 5 years of age, just before they start school. But as I mentioned, there's no actual national standard across Australia, and some hospitals do differ in what they offer. The assessment team, once again, can differ. It depends on what access to resources and allied health professionals each hospital has. But generally, the assessment team will include a development pediatrician, a psychologist, a physiotherapist, speech therapist, occupational therapist, and a dietitian. And each of those specialties will spend time with the baby or the child, with the parents present, and go through certain measures of how they're doing. They will ask them measurement tools, surveys, questionnaires that they can fill in. And it is quite a lengthy assessment. It can go up to, 2 to 3 hours, which, as you can imagine, for, a baby under 2 years, is quite a lot to stay focused and concentrated on. So having the babies and children in the right time and at the right space to be able to give that attention to the tasks can sometimes prove really difficult, which can also cause a lot of stress and emotions for the parents, especially if the child's going to be assessed on what they're doing in that one snapshot of time, that one moment. So it's definitely a very nerve-wracking assessment for the parents who obviously want to see their child shine and hopefully reach these milestones. Same again, this does differ a little bit from hospital to state to region as to who has access to these follow-on assessments. Most of the time, the most vulnerable or the most sickest babies will have access to this, but most hospitals will have some kind of criteria as to who they put in their follow-on program. And generally, it's babies that are born under 29 weeks gestation. They might have had a birth weight of below 1,250 grams. Some hospitals might extend that to 1,500 grams. And otherwise, babies that might have been born later but had a severe complication, such as HIE and other conditions that might have happened in the hospital or at birth. There's lots of barriers. As you know, Australia is a very large country, and we have 23 tertiary hospitals in our country. So that's hospitals providing the highest level of intensive care. What we call is a level 6 hospital. So if you have a baby and you're from a regional area or rural even and live a long, long way away from the city, the baby will be transferred either pre-birth or after birth, depending how quickly Bubby arrives. And they will be transferred to one of those tertiary hospitals. That brings a lot of emotional trauma and stress for the family. They're taken out of their own community, their own support networks, and there's obviously then a financial stress as well around travel, accommodation, and leaving work earlier than might be. And for a lot of these families, it's very difficult as well because sometimes only one parent can stay with the baby. So there's a lot of separation that happens for our regional and rural families, which needs a lot of work and a lot of focus in our country, to be honest, to improve that, because it is causing a lot of trauma. And as we know, if babies are going home to a really good functioning mental health family, then the babies are going to do better and thrive. So it's definitely a challenge for us in Australia. As I mentioned, transport and accommodation costs for these families is really quite severe, especially if they're, not at work or they only have a one-income family. It's really difficult. So sometimes these families will not attend some of the appointments and drop themselves out of the follow-on program, which then obviously means that these babies and children aren't getting that follow-on support that they might need. And any early intervention to therapies might not happen at all or not be picked up until the child starts school, which is then a lot of extra stress for the family and certainly the child in the school environment. Time away from work, home, and family is another big barrier. Parents, over those first 4 to 5 years, as we know, have a lot of follow-on appointments in between these assessments. And then to actually take more time off work and away from their home is, definitely a very large barrier. And I touched on it before, but the baby interaction in the assessment is another huge barrier. We might see babies that are doing things at home on their milestones. They might be rolling or starting to sit up or starting to walk. But if they're not cooperative in these assessments, that's another barrier that these babies might be identified of needing extra help than they might need. And that causes a lot of emotional trauma for the families and the parents as well. So it's definitely a very small moment of time for these babies that the assessment team get to see. So a lot of conversations happen with the parents around what they are doing at home. They ask the parents to fill in surveys and questionnaires as to what activities and things the baby or child might be doing at home to hopefully reduce those barriers. But there's definitely a lot of stress happens if baby just does not want to cooperate on the day, and then the assessment either can't be completed or the family have to come back again, and then we have all of that separation and financial trauma happening to the family once again. So I'm here today to talk to you about, from parents' perspective in our country, what we believe is needed for our babies and children as they grow and develop. It is quite a good follow-on program. I know that it doesn't happen globally, and we are extremely lucky to have access to these allied health specialists and to have these assessments happen. But there's still more needed. It's definitely, as we know, prematurity or being challenged at birth with an illness is definitely something that is lifelong. And the evidence just keeps mounting up as to, the life challenges that these children and families will have. We do believe as a parent organisation that we should have in Australia another assessment that should be added on around 10 to 12 years of age. We do know a lot of these children will go through primary school, and that is a very big developmental space for them. And heading into teenage years is very challenging, as we know. So we would be calling for our country to do another assessment at around 10 to 12 years of age, so towards the end of their primary school years, and helping them put in place any extra therapies that they might need to get ready to go into high school. There's also a lot of evidence around the 14 to 15 years and those emotional teenage years for these children. We know that extremely preterm boys through their teenage years are at higher risk of mental health, depression, anxiety, and sadly at times suicide. So we do strongly believe that an assessment at this critical point through their early to mid-teenage years is vital to help once again identify any extra support that these children might need. And that is such a critical point that can really set them up to where they succeed and thrive, or where they might be challenged into their adult years. So it's definitely something that as a parent organisation, we really want to see more of. And it's very costly in Australia to have private assessments. If you as a parent wanted to be able to do that privately with your own private healthcare team, it is very expensive, and there's a long waiting list for it as well. So it's definitely something that's needed, but at the moment isn't happening across Australia. Another add-on that we could work towards for our families is more localised remote clinics. As I mentioned on the previous slide, there's so much travel, financial burden and stress around families having to come back to the hospital where their baby might have been cared for in intensive care. And not only is that an emotional trauma for some families, those barriers remain really high on their list. So we would also call for our country to look at more localised remote clinics. So ideal world would be able to take these assessment teams out to certain regional areas where these families could still have these assessments, but in their own community, and also help them then assist in finding what support is around locally for them. So once again, they're not having to travel back to the major cities to have that support ongoing, which is a cost burden and very emotional and timely as well. We would like to see in the assessments more input from the parents and or the carer. At the moment, there is no real mental health checking for the parents. And once again, we know the evidence that's there around the trauma for these parents in going home and having your baby in neonatal intensive care, and trying to find your parental confidence takes a lot of time. And when you're back home and in your own community, you're usually around a community that doesn't know a lot about what your baby has been through. So it's very lonely, it's very isolating, and a lot of parents feel very lost. And as parents, we are not healthcare professionals, so we don't know what some of those signs might be to show that our child needs extra support or some therapies in place. So we would really call on mental health check-ins for parents as well, as part of the assessment, so that we're looking at the whole family unit and looking at it more holistically than just reaching certain milestones at certain life ages. Another huge barrier in Australia is developmental intervention. So even in some of our major cities, waiting lists and expenses for allied health professionals such as your speech therapist, occupational therapist, etc., is very, very long waiting lists. So you could have some children that are assessed as to needing, say, for example, speech therapy at 2 years of age at their assessment, but when they go back to their home, and even in the major cities, going on a waiting list to get an appointment for that therapy can sometimes be years, which kind of doesn't make sense to us as parents, that we provide a follow-on assessment and it highlights what extra support our children need, but then we don't have access to that actual therapy or support in our community. So we certainly need a lot more around developmental intervention for these children. Does anyone have any questions, or is there anything I can explain a bit clearer about that?
Would you prefer questions now or in the end?
Happy to have some questions now while we're in that slide, if anyone would like.
Let's see, because we usually do questions in the end, so that's probably nobody yet asked them, because we have a lot of people on Zoom. It's currently around 190 people on Zoom and some people on YouTube, so people are listening to you attentively. So let's wait.
Yeah, I just didn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Totally fine.
Okay.
I also wanted to share with you at Miracle Babies what we provide to support these families, and that can happen at any time. These families can access support. So in between those assessments, when they're going home and having questions about family support, we can provide that link. Once again, we aren't healthcare professionals, but we can give parents some guidance around how they can advocate for their child and how they can better access support to therapies and things that they need. We are sometimes quite well rehearsed in knowing what our governments can offer as well. So for a parent, that can be very difficult to navigate, finding what's around and what maybe government financial schemes families can access. So Miracle Babies can act as that middle link to helping families and guide them into areas where they may not have thought of, trying before. We have a 24-hour support helpline. So that's available for family, friends, extended family. It is 24 hours, 7 days a week, and it is answered by our program team, who are all parents who have had a baby in neonatal intensive care. So they have a very strong link to the emotional journey for these families and also the developmental challenges that these children face when they go home. And because, once again, Australia is very large, we do have that right across the country, and we have team members in every state. So those team members are also more aware of what might be available locally for these families. We also offer what we call Nurture Time. That's our in-hospital peer support program. It currently runs in 20 hospitals at the moment and is continuing to expand. But that is, once again, where one of our program team members, once again, who has had the neonatal intensive care experience with their child, attend the hospital NICU units and provide support to the families cot-side. So we're very big on championing zero separation. So providing the support to the parents whilst they're with their baby is really important. And it's such a valuable time that you get to have with your baby. We don't expect parents to have to go into another room to access support. So that's a really important support network right at that really critical time. Those parents often ask a lot around developmental concerns or worries they might have for their child, and what does it look like after discharge? what is out there for my baby and me to be able to access and have support once we go back home to our community. So that's really important. Another part is once a baby is discharged from the neonatal intensive care unit, we offer nurture groups, and they're our play and support groups. So they are limited to neonatal families and children who have significant conditions or challenges after discharge. And once again, this peer support is so vital for these families that they can ask questions of other parents, and it's right up until the child starts school. So any of those developmental questions or concerns that a parent might have can certainly be talked about in the group, and local families know what's usually around locally. So it's a great way for them to connect and ask questions, but also for them to share in a safe environment any of those emotions and trauma that they might be going through. And as all parents who have been through a similar experience, it is clearly a very supportive environment. We welcome babies that might be on oxygen, might have been discharged on tube feeds, in wheelchairs, any of those kinds of conditions. We do welcome all those families. So it's a really safe environment. We're very strict with our wellness policy. So it's another safe space for these vulnerable babies and families. And if anyone is unwell, they do not attend. So we try to keep all of those risks of infections and illnesses as minimal as we can for these families. Whilst the baby is in hospital, we offer resources to our families, and they're at certain pivotal points during the hospital stay. So we have what we call a NICU survival pack, and that is a pack that's given to every family when they're admitted to the neonatal intensive care unit and the special care nurseries. It includes a nurture guidebook, which is our parent guide that has been written in partnership with healthcare professionals. Everything we do is approved and cleared by a healthcare professional that is experienced in that particular topic. So if it's about speech, it has been approved by a speech therapist. So everything is really evidence-based. We work a lot on making sure we're up to date with relevant Australian research, but also global research as well. We also offer a Milk Express pack, and that has information on the benefits of mum expressing her breast milk for her baby during neonatal intensive care. We know how important that is, and it's like gold. It's medicine for these babies. So the more we can support mum and encourage her to express her breast milk, that's a really important thing too. We also clearly support mums who are unable to express their breast milk, because that's usually quite a traumatic time for the mum also. We have emergency care packs for our regional and rural families that are coming in from different areas and are away from home. So they are 48 hours of hygiene supplies. That allows the family to be able to focus on baby and the experience they're having, rather than worrying about going to the shops and things like that. We have a grad bag, which is a lovely celebration for when the families are discharged home. And that has another really important booklet in there called Going Home. And that details a lot of some of the questions that parents might have when they're being discharged. And when you've had your baby in NICU, whether it be weeks or months, it's really quite scary, and there's lots of fear around becoming that main primary caregiver and not having the support and the resources of a whole healthcare professional team there with you all the time. So it's really important that these parents can gain confidence in themselves in being able to care for their baby, and being able to advocate for their baby as well, and using their parent voice is really important, especially in those follow-on assessments and as baby goes through their developmental years ahead. We also offer a sibling activity pack. So we're very family focused. So that allows if the baby has a sibling, an older brother or sister, to be able to learn a bit about the neonatal intensive care experience, obviously in children language and children activities, that they can try to understand a bit of what their baby brother or sister have been going through. And we also, sadly, but it's needed, have a memory box, and that's a support, and it's also memory making tools for a family when a baby loses its fight for life in the NICU or special care nursery. And that's another difficult journey that's lifelong for parents as well. I also wanted to share with you our NurtureE information hub. So on our website, we have quite an extensive information hub. It's quite a world first in the amount of information that it has. We have lots of life stages, and it's in life stages, not ages. As we know, all these babies achieve their milestones and things at different points of their life. And we didn't want extra trauma on the parents if they're not reaching a certain milestone at a particular set time of life. And that information hub covers a high-risk pregnancy. So if someone's been diagnosed that might need a neonatal stay, or having another baby and have been determined at high risk. We also then have our in-hospital section, and that covers a lot of information around why baby might be in there. It has a glossary on healthcare professionals and also, certain risk factors or conditions that the baby might have at different times in the hospital. There's a large bereavement section in there as well for families. That includes mums, dads, and grandparents also. And then we go to post-pregnancy care. And post-pregnancy care is aimed to help mum be able to identify that she has needs too following a birth, and that she needs to look after herself as well. So that's fairly new, but it's very important to bring some attention back to mum, even though baby is in the NICU, that she really needs to take care of herself as well. We then go into the developmental years and talk about the assessments and follow-on clinics that these babies have. We show them an example of the tools that they might be asked at assessments, who will be in the assessment team, at what points that will happen, as I mentioned, the 4 months, 8 months, 12 months, and so on. And then it goes into preschool years and primary school years. And that's where we see most of these children being identified with having concerns from their parents. And they might have gone through the follow-on clinic at times and nothing had been identified, or very minimal challenges. But then when these children start preschool or primary school, that's when we see a lot of these challenges coming out, especially with absorbing information, decision-making, and social skills as well can be another huge challenge for these children. It also then covers onto high school years, which, as I mentioned earlier, is very big on the emotion side for these teenagers, and especially if they're needing extra help through school. School can be a hard place for anyone socially and fitting in, so it can be even extremely more challenging for these babies or children that need extra help through high school. It also covers adulthood. So as I mentioned, there is so much evidence coming out now that there's so much longitudinal research around health risk factors for these past patients that are now adults and what they're experiencing in later life. So our aim is to hope that these families, these children, as they become adults, and their parents can have really valuable conversations in the home and be able to make better life choices for themselves that might be able to reduce some of those health risk factors, but also to be aware to talk to their doctor that they were premature, or they did have, a condition at birth that might need some extra monitoring over their adult years. So it's really important tool. We are really excited and pleased that it now has a accessibility and inclusion tool. Australia is a very multicultural country. We have a very large refugee and migrant population, but also where English is not the first language. So our website can be changed into over 140 languages. It can, the text can change into the language and be translated, and you can also have the text into talk. So if someone isn't very literate with reading, it can also tell them and talk to them about what that text says. And there's tools for vision impaired, dyslexia, they can change color of screens. It's such an inclusion tool that is allowing families and healthcare professionals to be able to have these conversations in their own native language, which hopefully helps them understand what's happening for their baby and their child as they grow and develop as well. We have a large online social media community in open groups and closed groups. So there's also a lot around privacy and providing a safe space for these families to share and gain support from their peers. Every page on our website has a button that you can click through to our program team. So if anyone has been upset or has questions about the information they read, then they can also go straight through to our program team who can answer those questions. I've just taken a screenshot here as a bit of example of the information hub. And as you can see, it does cover quite a lot of stages. And those early years and preschool years, which we're talking about with follow-on assessments, is really so vital that these parents have some understanding before they go into those assessments about what will happen in the assessment, who will be there, what does it mean if my child isn't meeting a milestone, who do I go to for help? And what's really important about the Information Hub as well is it's not only evidence-based, it also has education in parent language and it has empowerment. So it really allows a space for the parents to be able to learn how to advocate for themselves and their child and what questions they might ask, who do they go to next for help, and to help them navigate through that, because as we know, if families and children have the help at the right time, we can certainly improve better outcomes for them all. So just on the language and accessibility tool, if you wanted to have a look at our website, please do so. There's a lot of languages. I did check and unfortunately Ukraine wasn't there. So I will raise that with our provider to see if that can be added. But there are lots of languages there and you can certainly refer families and have a look yourself. But the way to navigate through it is that green person in the circle is at every page on the screen. You click on that and then that toolbar opens up where you can go through and change it to what your special needs or to how you can help understand it better. So that's an example of one of the pages on the NICU growth and development clinics. So as I mentioned, neonatologist or pediatrician, nurse or doctor, physiotherapist, speech pathologist, child psychologist, and a dietitian or nutritionist. Excuse me. So there's guidelines as well for these assessments, but they're not always, I guess, have access to the same team. So they can't always be run exactly the same wherever you might be. It depends what allied health team is available. And GPs in Australia are very broad, so they don't always have a lot of experience around a baby who's been in the NICU. So once again, this information and having parent understanding it can help them also advocate to their GP. There's an example of that same page being translated into another language. I think it was Korean or Chinese. So it's really accessible for everyone to be able to have a look at it. And as I mentioned, it's all in partnership with healthcare professionals in Australia and approved by them and supported by them. So it's a tool that in our hospitals is used quite widely and continues to expand with new topics, which is wonderful to see that doctors and also parents are telling us that we should add to the topic list as well. So it's still growing at a rapid rate. And there's another page in another language. I've just put this slide here to almost finish up, but just to share a bit about what is identified in Australia for some of these families. I'm sure it's quite global, but learning difficulties, as we know, cerebral palsy, social failure, failure to thrive, death, developmental delays, feeding challenges, financial stress, as we mentioned several times, social behaviour. And for the parents, there's a lot around fear, guilt, anxiety, loneliness. We have quite a high rate of marriage and relationship breakdown amongst our neonatal families, and feeding challenges as well is very stressful for the parents. I thought I would just pop that there. That's my 3 surviving children who are now all young adults. So a lot of our programs and our information hub that we deliver for families has been designed through families like mine who have experienced those challenges throughout childhood and all the school years as well. And my daughter there with glasses, she's my surviving twin at 25 weeks. And she's certainly been, I guess, such a learning experience for me in regards to not only parenting, but learning to be an advocate for her and helping her through her school years. She's a remarkable young lady, and she's just always just dealt with things so well. And I think part of that is because she's always been, we've been very open with her, and we've also, you know, always advocated strongly for her to access what support she's needed along the way. So I thought I would just share that. And thank you.
Дякуємо дуже, Кайлі. І тепер підемо в питання. Почну, мабуть, зі своїх питань, поки, колеги, ви формулюєте свої. Звідки береться бюджет під вашу організацію? І наскільки це дорого її утримувати на рік, наприклад?
We don't get any regular government funding, so we are mostly community funded through fundraising campaigns, donors, supporters and trusts. So funding for us is always a challenge, and it does sadly limit our growth. We know our programs work, we know it's accessible and available for families, but actually having a team member in every hospital does cost money. So the only limit to the work that we provide is really from funding. So we have a very good fundraising and marketing team that work really hard to that. With the follow-on assessments, they are funded through the hospitals. So we don't actually have to pay for them. They are funded through the neonatal intensive care units budgets from the government.
Ви сказали, що є гаряча лінія, яка працює 24/7. Скільки вона в середньому приймає дзвінків і скільки людей там працює? І хто ці люди?
Good question. Through business hours or through the day, it comes to our national head office, and we have many of our employees are parents who have experienced the NICU stay, so they can usually answer that. And then we pass them out to our program team across the country. And after hours, there's only a couple of us that do it actually, so I'm pretty much always on call. It doesn't call a lot after hours, but that's once again because we don't have the money to market it as strongly as we could. So the more, if we had money to do TV advertisements and billboards and really make it more known, it would be much busier, but we don't have those funds. But we have posters and flyers in the hospital units, and we do a lot on social media as well. So it's a lot of word of mouth that we try and, you know, allow these families how to access our information and our supports.
Ви сказали, що ви підтримуєте наразі батьків прямо в 20 госпіталях, тобто прямо на місці, де є відділення інтенсивної терапії, якщо я все правильно зрозуміла. Як до такої підтримки ставляться самі госпіталі, лікарі, медичні сестри? Чи вони сприймають вас як контролерів, аудиторів? Чи вони раді такій допомозі? Чи був якийсь супротив? Як вам вдалося туди зайти з цією допомогою?
Initially, many years ago, there was some resistance from the social work department, feeling a little bit like, well, this is what we do. But we are very clear in that we're peer support. We're not professional counsellors. We aren't social work. So all of our team is trained to be able to communicate that to the family directly in the first conversation. We don't answer any clinical questions. But we have been able to be that safe space where, and we have doctors coming to us all the time saying, you know, it's wonderful because they have had a conversation with a parent and they've gone away and thought, okay, that's all good. But yet the parent has come to our team member and like, I don't really understand that. What does that mean? But instead of us answering those clinical questions, we go back to the doctors and say, can you please go and re-speak to the parent? She didn't quite get it. And I think it's sometimes a little bit of fear and being overwhelmed and anxious for the parents in that moment. How do you ask a doctor? You know, it's sometimes a bit fearful. So this allows them the safe space to be like, I didn't understand it. And then our team member can facilitate a further conversation. And we get lots of good feedback from doctors saying, thank you. I wasn't sure, didn't think they, you know, thought they had understood, but they didn't. So very well received by doctors. We are expanding at the moment. Over the past probably 18 years, we've been running in most of the hospitals with our face-to-face support. So that's someone in the unit providing a cot-side support for about 3 hours a week. We're now rolling out our new program, which is 15 hours per week in the NICU. So it's one dedicated support worker who is the same person, gets to know the families from birth right through to discharge. So they're not having to retell their trauma story. We're actually going through the journey with them. And it's building much stronger relationships with the healthcare professionals as well. We can run parent education sessions. We can, you know, do any events that they'd like to bring the families together to connect. So we're like an extra hand for the healthcare professionals, so that allows the doctors and nurses to really focus on the clinical side.
Яку саме підтримку ви як фундація отримуєте від медичної системи? І якої би ще хотіли? Чи ви з ними якось зустрічаєтесь? Чи є у вас якісь спільні конференції? Чи може щось інше? І може ви б хотіли щось іще саме від медичної системи?
We do attend the conferences here in Australia. So we have the Perinatal Society of Australia and New Zealand, and we go to that annually. We have presented abstracts and done presentations before at that conference, but we are there every year in a presence. So the doctors and nurses can always come and speak to us and ask any questions. We also do have parents on a lot of research projects. So there's strong relationships there with certain doctors and researchers that know a lot about our program. And we are also on some state health committee advisory groups and things like that, and same in the hospital. So it's been a lot of work, but we're definitely quite important to the health system. Not they don't give us any money, but yeah, definitely important part of the neonatal team. And whilst we're in, at the moment, 20 hospitals, that's face-to-face, our resources are in over 70 hospitals across the country. So where we don't have a team member that can be in the unit, they still do receive our resources and can access the information hub and our phone line.
Всі знають, що в Австралії дуже класна система охорони здоров'я, і часто люди рівняються на цю систему і на протоколи, і на різні рекомендації, і на те, як вона побудована. Чого ще нема для передчасно народжених дітей, а ви би хотіли, щоб було? І ви проводите адвокацію, щоб воно з'явилось.
Yeah, there's a few things actually. One thing we've been advocating for a while in Australia is for an additional critical care payment for these families. In Australia, we currently have a paid parental leave scheme. So that's where the government pay new parents up to 26 weeks at the minimum wage so that mum or the main caregiver can be home with the baby before they have to return to work. But most of our families that are in neonatal intensive care for 4 or 6 months, that's actually all used up by the time baby is discharged. So that's definitely a huge issue for us in Australia. And we know these babies go home with more vulnerable needs than a full-term healthy baby, yet we're putting the parents in this financial situation where they either have to leave their job or go back to work before the baby is ready. And we all get told, you know, don't put your baby into childcare yet. They're too vulnerable. You don't want them around a lot of other children. So the government do not make it easy in that regard. So that's been a big advocacy conversation for us, which we are continuing with. And also around the follow-on assessments, having something more around that 10 to 12 age group and 14 to 15 age group is definitely something that is really important and we would like to see happen in Australia.
Зараз я перевіряю, чи є в нас питання. Питань від глядачів наших немає, але є дуже багато слів подяки. І слів подяки і про організацію, і про презентацію, і про фотографію вашої родини.
Thank you. We're very lucky to have a lot of passionate parents in Australia that can be able to do that. So we are very lucky.
Ми вам дуже дякуємо за цю презентацію, дякуємо за те, що були сьогодні з нами. І всім дуже дякуємо, хто нас дивився. Вас було навіть більше, ніж 220 людей. І це, мені здається, дуже класно, що ви від початку до кінця дивились цю презентацію. Дуже дякуємо, Кайлі, і всім дякуємо, хто нас дивився.
Thank you for having me.